Alright, David, I have downloaded your files. I put your index HTML file there. I put your master CSS in a folder called CSS. And I'm now going to look at what you've done. So, if I go to open, and I'm on CS4, hopefully that doesn't throw you off too much. So, alright, so I'm going to, for the sake of this recording, I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to give a little more space. And so if I start looking at things, I can start seeing the different things that you have going on here. Lots of different divs. So, alright, so let's just take a look at your split view, and let's make sure. Alright, so you did have your CSS master in a folder, so that's why it all looks good. And if I start going down, I can see that you have a container div, you have a ID div, or a header div, and the header div you have two different things you used here. Okay, so let's keep moving on down and then you have a left nav div. Okay, then you have a content div. I'm just going on down, and then you have a footer div, and then your container div closes. So actually, your HTML looks pretty good. So now my guess is the CSS. So the thing that's both frustrating is helpful as an external style sheet is you have to keep toggling back and forth. So if I look over here, I can see your CSS. Okay, so you have your container. Okay, so it's 960. Alright, so you have a 10 pixel margin. Okay, that looks good, font size. Then you have a header. I'm just looking at everything you have here. And the thing that's interesting is you can actually, the container's the outside box. And so if your header is within it, you can actually get away with not having a width because it's basically going to fill the full container anyways. And the other thing that you can get away with is you usually don't need a height either if you're going to just put an image here. So sometimes I think it's easier, especially when you're just learning this, is to just create a banner image. So this is called the 10 most important. So you have this as an H1. So I'm going to highlight this. Alright, and just going to hit none. Fireworks is coming up. And I'm going to actually cut this. So I'm going to use this to basically create a banner image. So it looks like your container is 960, so the image should be 960 wide. So there it is. Alright. So the header. And so the header, I'm going to actually get rid of the padding. I'm just going to get rid of the height. Honestly, I can get rid of all this. I'm going to leave it here, but the reality is I'm going to put an image in there, so you're not going to see that anyways. But you can see now that I've gotten rid of the height, how it's gotten all small. So, I'm going to create a new. I'm going to call the width 960. I think you had it as 150. I'm going to paste your text in there, and I'm going to take a look at the color again. I think you just had as black, so I'm just going to stick with that. I'm going to make this, we'll say 30. See, that looks like we could probably even go further, but we don't want to go too big. Alright. So, we could make this all one line, or you could go with the two line effect, but let's just honestly, what you could do is something like this. Top 10, and we want to Can't see it all, so I'm gonna just seeing how you might play with some of this. And that's part of the power too, I think, of using, say, a graphics program like Fireworks. And it might be actually that you don't want that to be, oops, I'm going to actually switch these, is a graphics program in some ways makes it easier to do basic things that might be harder to do with CSS. Now, harder probably is not the best way to put it, but I guess when you're new to CSS, sometimes it's easier just to jump in a graphics program like Fireworks and create what you want. So let's I'm spending way too much time on this trying to just give you a basic idea. Alright, so now I could keep this as transparent, and the nice thing about that is the colors that you have would shine through. Or I could actually just color this background whatever I wanted the canvas to be. In this case, I'm just going to leave it this way, and I'm going to call this banner, and I'm going to go to your folder, and I'm going to create a folder called images, and I'm going to save it there. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to this, and I'm not sure what was going on here with this text here, and you have this H3. I'm just going to delete it, and with my mouse still in that, I'm going to go to Insert, Image. I'm going to click OK. Just put banner for now, and there we go. So now I'm going to save this, and I'm going to preview it. It basically was prompting me to save the CSS as well. So what you see is I got rid of the height, but what's causing this header div to stretch the appropriate height is the image that I put in there. And I just used a transparent background, but you can see so far looking pretty good. Couple of things going on over here with the navigation on the left, and then the footer div is doing some weird things, and then we have these headings that we want to fix. So let's go back down here, and let's take a look at this. So this, it looks like, is created here from this H1, so let's just get rid of that. And I like having this split view because for me it just helps make sense of stuff here. And so with the navigation, sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually just start putting in, do a Shift Enter, Shift Enter, Shift Enter. And you would want to have more meaningful titles than page 2, 3, 4, etc. But this just helps me kind of make sense of, okay, what, how's this going to look? So let's scroll down. Let's see where your footer went. So I'm going to go to full code view just so I can see it. There's the footer. So let's go to split. Alright, so the footer is over here. Alright, so let's see. So the footer is below that. So let's see what you've used. So now I'm on the CSS and I'm looking for footer. I'm going to get rid of this position absolute. And there it goes. You notice how just doing that? So let's save it and preview it. Because that absolute positioning was keeping it there, but you notice that now you can't really see it because it's at the bottom of the page of the recording. But trust me when I say at the very bottom of down here, you will see the footer is where it needs to be. So now the other couple things to think about are this heading stuff. So let's take a look at what's going on there. Alright, so if I just go to your code, I'll go to split view just so it's not too scary. I can see the H1 to 2. So, and sometimes I'll even add text here. This is text that follows a level 1 heading. And you could even, copy this. And the reality is, a lot of times you won't need a level 2 and a level 3 heading. For certain sites, you might find that 2 levels of heading are all you need, or sometimes just 1 level of heading. But regardless, it's nice to put this in here nonetheless. So now let's take a look at the CSS and see what's going on with your H1 tags. So if I start scrolling down, one of the things I do, because when you keep playing with your CSS, sometimes you'll mess things up and it will be missing just a semicolon, and then all of a sudden it's not working. And so I'll scroll down and I'll just look at the colors, because the colors tell me, like, if I get rid of this semicolon here, it will, well, of course it's not going to do it now. Let's see if this one does it. Yeah. So you notice that when I get rid of that semicolon, the margin changed to color. And so little things like that happen that are important to be aware of. So in this case, I want to get rid of position absolute on these. That's the biggest problem that's happening here. Some people say you should never use position absolute. The only time you'll really use it is if you with divs, and you wouldn't use it with like an HTML tag like H1 for the most part. But so what absolute positioning means is if I click on this heading, wherever I put it, that's where it's going to stay. So I'm going to save this, and I will show you what I mean. See, so that's exactly where it stays. The reality is every browser deals with absolute positioning a little differently, so it's usually not something you would use, and you usually wouldn't use it for a heading. You just might use it for a div. So if I go to master CSS, and if I go to here, I'm going to actually delete that. And you notice, I see what it did is once I moved it, it gave the coordinates from the top left corner of the screen. It's saying it's 300 pixels to the left and 388 from the top. But we don't need that. Same thing with this one. So these are your H1, 2, and 3 tags. It looks like you didn't add it to the H3, but you did to the others. And you notice I just when I do that, boom. Okay? It's exactly what it wants. And so then when I'm over here, if I want space, I could actually change the paragraph tag to allow space after, or I can always just get in the habit, I can add a shift enter between each, and then you'll notice we have nice carp going on. So I'm doing shift enter twice, and what it's doing actually, so just to show you, back to the beautiful thing of the split view, let's get out of CSS and look at the code, is it's just putting in 2 line breaks. So, alright, so the last thing I want to, looking at this, that you would think about would be, I guess, 2 things. One is you might want some padding over here. So I could put my mouse in here, and I notice that it highlights down here. It says the left nav, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to bring my CSS folder back, my window. So I got my left nav, I hit plus, and I believe the way you set up was just like this. I'm going to get rid of container. Master CSS is selected. So a couple things that I might do is I might, let's go down. So over here, padding, I might decide I want a 10 pixel padding for that. So if I hit OK, when I scroll up, you'll notice that now I have that nice white space. So that looks good. So now, if I want to, let's pretend that my home page was called index. So I'd create that link. My page 1. Let's pretend that this is actually what I'm going to name these files. So you could just leave these as is and not worry about styling them anymore, because right now, they basically would be working if we had the other pages. And so to get the other pages, all I'd have to do is page1.html. So I'm just creating each of these pages. Oops. Now I'd really want to go back through all of these and actually change the title. So I'd want to change this to page 4 or whatever the meaningful title was. I'd do the same, and I'd want to, add a header, but you get the idea. So now, if I go back to my home page, when I preview it, I can see that when I click on page 1, it goes to page 1. When I click on page 2, it goes to page 2. So all that's working. So and actually you can see right now, it's pushing the body content down. And so if I actually, and I believe it's doing that in part because I added this padding. So that's an example where you can play with your CSS, and I could get rid of my padding, or I could push down here and click on content, and I could take a look at how the content container, so see, the width is set up there. So I actually could just say, that's actually the container. See, I'm about to edit the wrong thing. So the content is floating left. I actually want that to float right because the nav is to the left. And this is where you could play with the width and get the width just right. But you can see the padding being 10 pixels. I tend to always add that. So I'm going to hit save all and see what it looks like. You can see it's still off. And if you actually even look, you can see we have about 20 pixels we're off. And so you can actually pull out the calculator and do the math, or I tend to just start experimenting. So it looked like 20 pixels, so I'm going to change this to 790, and it's not quite there yet, right? So I'm getting closer, right? And so I'm going to take another 20 off. Make sure I'm doing this to the right thing. Container. Alright, so I'm going to change this to 70. And there it goes. Boom. Fits right back in there. Think of it almost as a puzzle piece. Alright, so I'm going to save this. So everything's looking good right now. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the links. Hold on. There's one in the Ed Tech room. So if you go around the corner, you'll see the door that says Ed Tech, and there's a conference room in there. Definitely. Okay, so sorry about that. Alright, so now I'm going to click on Home. I'm going to click on the link, and I'm going to click on this plus sign, and I'm going to get rid of container, and I'm just going to, basically what I'm doing is I'm saying anything with that A tag, which is basically a hyperlink, within the left nav, I want to use this specific style. So I'm going to go in here, and the main thing I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to change my height. So I hit apply, and you see how that got bigger. I could also give text directions, so I could play with, maybe I don't want underlined, or maybe I do want it. So I'm going to just hit none, and you notice there it went away. So just like that, I'm going to save this. I'm going to take a look, and you'll see I just did a few things, and I took what you had, and boom, we're done. I mean, we're not done, but you get the idea. I mean, you basically have a fully functioning web page right here. So I hope this helps. Let me know if it doesn't, and we can move forward from here. Thanks.